Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Momentum Lifestyle Podcast by myself, Blake Worrell-Thompson.
And me, Janoah Van Keekum. Momentum is a men's well-being and performance community dedicated to helping men be better.
Each week, we deep dive with your favorite thought leaders and experts from around the world to get their insights to help you be better. Enjoy the episode. Now, guys, before we get started on this week's podcast, I want to talk to you about our Momentum Mastermind. The Mastermind is our 12-month program for men who want to surround themselves with other committed men, all with similar interests, values, and goals. Whether you're looking to build or grow a profitable lifestyle business, develop financial freedom, get in the best shape of your life, or create an intimate and epic relationship, the Mastermind is perfect for those who are looking to have it all. We know that to create these results and this kind of lifestyle on your own can be super challenging. So join now for your free 30-day trial. Simply visit our website, www.themomentumlifestyle.com.au. Up the top, you'll see a section for programs. Click on the programs, you'll see our mastermind, and you can sign up there now for your free 30-day trial valued at $1,000. We look forward to seeing you part of the mastermind.
Eva Hooft, the Dutchie. welcome. So firstly, just for everyone listening, currently I'm sitting in LA. And that's how we actually met. And we met through a new mutual friend. So one of your good friends, Lucy, right, was leaving LA and coming to Byron, and her and my business partner, Blake, had just met, and she was at my house randomly. We met for an hour, and she was like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to LA." She's like, "Oh." She goes, "Oh, I've got to," I said, "Should I introduce you to someone?" I said, "Yeah." Well, I explained what I'm into and blah, blah, what I'm like. She's like, "Okay, I'll have a think about it." And then she came out with Eva Hooft. I'm going to hook you up with Eva Hooft. That's it. It's one name. Went to your breathwork and healing session first up, and next to it was spending Christmas Day together as a couple of orphans.
Yeah.
So it's good to get you on the podcast. And you've had a pretty interesting day with a bit of sound at your house, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, it's been so fun just like spending time together the last couple of weeks. And again, like so random how Lucy connected us, but I feel like it's always nice to meet people in that way when you just come to a city. And yeah, I basically had construction going on all day at my house. So we pushed it till a little later and now we're here. So I'm glad we could make it work.
First thing I want to start with is sort of back to the beginning. I was sort of having a bit of look into, your background, and something that struck a chord with me was the experience of bullying. And, I've had the same thing when I was younger, but I don't think it manifested into as severe behaviors on my end. It sort of more as a primary school experience for me. And then high school, things kind of flipped for me, and I was able to sort of work through it. But even that experience now, it still comes up in things that I work through. So I'd love you to go into, just the power. Obviously, the power of like word is huge, and I just love to hear a bit of how that was for you and how it impacted your life in those early years.
Yeah, absolutely. So I basically went to school with a lot of rich people, and we were the only people that were not rich. So you basically already have that basis to get bullied, right? Like everyone's wearing designer clothes, and you're just, my mom would dress me in like overalls with like flowers and give me like a haircut that was like not as in, I would say. So yeah, I basically was bullied my entire, I think that's like preschool. I don't know the whole American school system, but basically from age, I want to say like 5 or 6 till I was 12, I was bullied, and I was always kind of like an outsider. And it was actually mainly because I was the only person standing up for the people that were bullied. So I saw people getting bullied. Yeah. And I was like, that's like, why are you guys doing that? So I would actually be friends with the people that were bullied, and automatically then you're also bullied. So that's kind of how it went for me. And to be honest, like I don't really remember those years. I feel like it was so traumatizing for me that I kind of blocked it out of my memory. But then it manifested into me going to high school, which was like, the first thing I did when I got to high school at 12 years old was like wearing tons of makeup because I was so insecure and I was always bullied. And so I basically came to this new school and I was like, this is my chance to develop a new identity. And so I started wearing tons of makeup, and I started rebelling against, everyone, because I was like, I was bullied and now I can bully back. So Yeah, so that kind of started off with me starting to drink a lot of alcohol, smoke weed, smoke cigarettes, rebel against my parents because those were the only people actually giving me love. And so I was like pushing them away. And then I basically spiraled into, I want to say like 2 years of really heavy depression because it was kind of haunting me. And I realized I couldn't change my reality and my past. And I also started getting bullied at this new school. So it kind of followed me into my teenage years. And it actually got to a point where I was suicidal for a couple years. And my boyfriend at the time kind of dragged me out of that whole spiral. So he was literally like saving my life. And funny enough, I actually got scouted to become a model. And so that's when things changed for me because that was for the first time, it was that external validation after years of feeling bullied of like, you are pretty. And I actually, funny enough, went into modeling because I needed that external validation. So yeah, it's always really funny to see like how that journey goes of like everyone bullying you. And therefore it only made sense for me to go into modeling to then experience actual validation from people. And yeah, it took me a lot of years to kind of get out of that. It was always haunting me. And then all of a sudden it became my identity to be a model. And so I held on to that identity and to what it meant to look good and be a certain weight and all that for years. And it wasn't really until recently that I was able to actually let some of that go and figure out that like I am worthy of everything without needing to look a certain way. So
it's wild, isn't it? It was I had a similar sort of experience where it was not who I was as a human being that brought me out of being bullied. It was what I could do. So you could be pretty, right? And for me, it was because I could be good at sport and good with girls. That was something that flipped it around. Suddenly I was the guy. It wasn't about who I was. It was about what I could do and achieve. And similar sort of thing. That's where I hang my hat on for so long. And then when those things disappear, it's like, fuck, who am I?
Yeah.
It's a wild little journey. And so the idea of being a model and when you look at, and I'm sure lots of people look at the model life as this glamorous life, right? Because all you see is the pretty pictures and, the blah, 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 and the amazing locations. Tell us how your experience actually was, after the excitement of suddenly being validated for being pretty. How was...
Yeah, it was actually quite the opposite of what people think. So I actually always almost made it. So I got all the job options. I got all the, the excitement around your career. Like I did have a lot. I had a couple good years where I was in like every single magazine, like Italian Vogue, which is like the highest thing you can achieve. And so I had all these achievements, but what they don't tell you is that the magazines don't pay you anything. So you're actually losing a lot of money. And at the time, I'm a young woman and I don't have any money. So you basically, you're in debt like your entire career if you're like me. So I was like hanging on by a thread. My parents, who actually had very little money, were constantly sending me money to support my career and to be able to, or to have me, be in a foreign city and do my groceries and live my life. But to be honest, most of my years, especially when I was living in Milan, I was living off of 50 euros a week. I was going to 3 different grocery stores to get all the groceries on sale. I was barely eating just because I couldn't afford to eat. And so there you are as like, a 17, 18-year-old girl being a model, and it looks all glamorous and people are like, oh wow, you're going to all these clubs and these parties and you're at these amazing events, and meanwhile you're like not even able to afford anything. And it's actually a really scary place to be because you realize how much power your modeling agency has over you, because if anything goes wrong, I can't even afford a flight ticket home tomorrow, right? So it's like they basically just own you. It's a very scary thought. And for years, I was so scared of my agencies, like every single one of them, because I knew that they held the power over me. And if they told me that tomorrow my career was over, then I had nothing. And so that's pretty much what they don't tell you about the modeling industry. And same for me when I was living in New York for 3 years, it was like paycheck to paycheck. I was living on friends' couches. There was a time that I was living in someone's closet for 3 months. Like they literally had a no, they had a walk-in closet and I put like an air mattress there and that was like my room. And I lived rent-free. And then in exchange for living rent-free, I had to go out to clubs with them. And so like I was struggling to get by pretty much until like 3 years ago. It was like always having like a little like side hustle going on, making some cash here and there to be able to, afford food and groceries. But it was not uncommon for my bank account to drop below 200 every single month. So yeah, it's not as glamorous as you think.
No, that's a bit of pressure on the old nervous system going for that all the time. Did you, at that stage, did you have any coping mechanisms? Like, had you been exposed to any kind of wellness at that point, or were you just purely running blind, just hanging on?
No, I unfortunately had nothing to hold on to. So I pretty much dissociated from everything that was going on for a couple years. So anytime money came up or my parents asked me, to look at my taxes or do anything, I would literally just pretend it didn't exist. So I would just push it off and just kind of pretend that everything was okay. And also just that whole entire phase of my depression and the bullying, it just kind of caused me to shut off of all my emotions. So I had all my walls up. I was running on cortisol. I was running on like 4 cups of coffee a day. And so I had no idea. I was just going. And I didn't stop for a second to even look at all the mess behind me. So I was just, getting from one day to another. And really the only thing I had to hold on to was counting my calories and making sure that I was working out twice a day, because those were the only 2 things in my control. And it was pretty crazy. Yeah.
Okay, it's extreme. That definitely takes away the glamorous shine of a life, doesn't it? Living in a closet. So what was kind of the shift? So when did you start learning about, obviously, now you do coaching with wellness, and we'll go into the details of all the gut health in a minute. But when did you start learning about this kind of stuff? When did that start shifting for you?
When it comes to health and nutrition, so I grew up with my dad being a chef. So I've always loved anything related to food and nutrition. And my parents were both really spiritual. So they actually met in a yoga class and they kind of gave me some basics, but obviously, when you're a child, you don't want to hear it or it's not real. And so I was exposed to it for a little bit at a young age. So it was always nice to kind of have that in the back of my mind. And it wasn't really until COVID hit that I actually started getting into meditation regularly. However, I was already really well on track with everything nutrition. Like I knew everything about food because again, that was kind of my way of controlling things, right? So I became obsessed with eating healthy. I basically didn't eat out at restaurants for like a couple years because I wasn't in control of the ingredients that went into it. And I wasn't in control of the salts and the oils. And so I took it the extreme way at first, but I was, trying to be healthy. So I knew a lot about health already and obviously working out, but it was kind of that mental piece that was missing. And so that kind of happened to me when my career basically came to a stop during COVID. And I was forced to move back home because I couldn't afford to live in New York. So I was by myself with no friends because I hadn't been in Holland for like 5-6 years. And I was just, sitting in an apartment, just being like, oh my God, like, what am I doing with my life? And where is it going? And I realized that I'm bringing no value to this world. And all I'm doing is running off stress hormones and promoting fast fashion and only like getting myself in more debt. And I was like, wait, like, this is not what my parents told me when they said, just do whatever makes you happy. Right. And yeah, it hit me really hard. And I went through, a period of a lot of shadow work and a lot of fear. And for the first time, I actually learned to open up to all those years of emotions that were suppressed, of physical pains that were suppressed. And so, yeah, it was kind of the entirety of the lockdown and COVID that I got to dive inside. I did a lot of plant medicine journeys, a lot of inner work. And this is kind of when I started realizing I actually want to figure out how to help people and how to make an impact on this world. And so, yeah, that's kind of been the change for me.
I love hearing the the stories of people that, for some people, COVID was hard, and it was still hard, but for a lot of people, it was a bit of a smack or a stop something that they probably went to stop themselves to shift tracks a little bit. So a good experience for you in the end. And so obviously now specializing in the gut and enzymes and the liver, flushes, which I'll probably not doing, I think, especially after my last week. So tell me about the gut. So I would probably say that when I look after my health, probably like knowledge and consideration of and understanding the deeper levels, the impact of the gut and enzymes, etc., is probably one of the areas that I haven't focused on a lot. And obviously, the outer is the reflection of the inner, which I know. This is one area that I'm like, I actually haven't properly nailed and explored this where I should. So it's going to be something up to my radar for this year. So tell me about the gut. So why would someone who's like, what do you mean worry about the gut? We sort of hear about it a bit, but to tell me the importance of the gut and how it actually relates to maybe issues that we see today. Like maybe you're saying the other day, like, oh, yeah, things like rashes and this, like for people to understand, it's like, okay, instead of putting makeup, some cream on the outside, this is how I can impact this stuff on the inside.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I focus both on the gut and the liver because they're super connected and they just like make up everything. It's kind of like that initial building block. It's like the core, the root of our entire health. And so I don't know if you know this, but 90% of our serotonin is created in our guts. So that's why it's like our gut health and our mental health are literally directly connected. So there's so many people that I see that have poor gut health and that are suffering from depression and anxiety. And I saw this in myself. It was for years when I didn't focus on my gut health. And, especially in diet culture, people like to say, oh, eat the sugar-free things or the low fat and a lot of processed foods. And so although you might be losing weight, you're actually paying for it with your mental health, with the amount of energy that you have, the vitality that you carry. And so we think that we're very much in control over how we feel, right? But it's like we are one organism and there's thousands of organisms living within us. And so it's actually them controlling us instead of us controlling them. So as much as we think that we have a say about how we think, how we feel, what we're craving, it's actually our gut microbiome, and for many of us, actually also parasites that have an impact on how we feel, how we behave, as well as how well our organs are functioning. And so, according to Chinese medicine, every single organ has a different emotion. So if you're repressing a lot of emotions, then you might actually see that manifest in illness within different organs. And so anger and resentment, and mostly anger and resentment, they store in our liver. And so for a lot of people that do not express their anger, or they just, repress it, or they're always the nice guy and they try to, brush everything off with humor, they actually have a lot of liver toxicity. And it's because when the emotion's not fully felt, it's actually like it has an effect on the impact of your organs. And same for our small intestine, is where we carry a lot of grief and sadness. And so you might notice this when you're in a stressful situation or something bothers you, you tense up your stomach, and like it's directly connected to both our organs, but also the way our bodies act. And so outside of that, the amount of toxins that we're exposed to on a daily basis, whether it's the air that we breathe, the alcohol that we drink occasionally, medications, just food additives, bad oils, our livers have to filter all of that. And so it can do that to an extent, but after years and years and years of toxin buildup, it's like, okay, I've had enough. And so then the toxins will spill over into your small intestines. And then when your small intestines are toxic, they will spill over into your blood, your lymphatic system. And so for me, when I look at something with my clients, it doesn't really matter what your diagnosis is to me, unless it's something, that is really serious. If you're coming to me and you're like, I have acne, or I have hormonal issues, or I have candida or parasites, I don't really like to look at that label. I like to just say, okay, everything is we can trace everything back to the liver. So for one person, this toxin overload and the acidity in the body might manifest as rashes or food sensitivities or other complications. But ultimately, you can reverse all of that by basically giving your body a chance to heal itself. And that's what I like to really bring across to people, is that the body always wants to heal itself, and it's always going to try to heal itself. So all you need to do is just give it the space to do that.
So is a good diet, if I were to say to you, okay, cool, give me your, a diet for best gut and liver health, is just that enough? Or because even like the nutrients that we get from veggies these days are like minuscule compared to what we're used to with the quality of the soil, etc. And it's really hard often to find good nutrient-rich food, right? So is a good diet now with food we've got access to enough, or is it really important to also add in extra bits and pieces or supplements or things like that? Because I'd consider I eat reasonably pretty well actually, but again, sometimes I go out to eat and you can't control what's in a lot of the stuff, or it's always been grown or what's into it. Do you look at the liver and the gut so separately, and okay, this is the sort of the gut protocol here, and then this is what we do with the liver? So how would you separate those two in terms of, your top 5 do's and don'ts? Top 5 do's and don'ts supplements, like?
Yeah. So first of all, the reason why a lot of us are actually not as healthy is because what happens over the years is because we cook so much of our foods, our food is empty. We have a lot of processed foods that we take in. So our bodies produce so much mucus, and that gets stuck into our small intestine. So unless you're on a raw food diet for the last 10 years, you're going to have what's called mucoid plaque, which is a buildup of mucus and bacteria and parasites, and even old food that gets stuck on the walls of your small intestine. So even when you start eating super healthy tomorrow and you get, the best foods, the best soil, all like, vine ripened, beautifully grown, if you don't draw those toxins out and that mucoid plaque out of your body, then you're not going to fully absorb all those nutrients. It's kind of like when you look at a sink pipe that's not being cleaned for like 10 years. And there's just like all this toxic buildup on the sides, and like you need to fully clean it out before it can actually absorb all the nutrients. And so this is also what I like to tell people. It's like, it doesn't really matter what supplements you're taking or what you're eating. If your insides are toxic and they're not clean and you're not eliminating properly, you're basically just peeing out very expensive pee when you spend a lot of money on. So, because your bodies can't, our bodies can't absorb it unless you actually clean everything out. And then with that, like, yes, like you're saying, our soil is very depleted. Unfortunately, most of the fruit and vegetables that you find in stores is picked like 2 weeks before it's fully ripe. So it's kind of like a premature baby, right? It doesn't fully grow and get all the nutrients. Which is why I like to tell people, if you can, go to farmers markets, support your local community, because, that's just eating with the seasons. And then, like you said, when we look at the liver and the intestines separately or together, they go hand in hand, because the intestines are where most of our issues manifest, right? Like we can see that we have bloating, we can see that we have poor digestion, for example. However, that is really just a liver issue, because our body should be alkaline, because our stomach is super acidic, right? And it kills all the bacteria and it digests some of the food. And then the moment that goes into your small intestine, your liver should excrete a lot of bile, and the bile is alkaline and it should neutralize that acidic content. But if your liver is toxic and clogged, and you have like gallstones and parasites clogging, the thousands of bile ducts that there are, then this acidic content will stay acidic. And this is basically where you'll see all the microbial imbalances. It's a perfect breeding environment for parasites, candida, even mold. And so that's, again, it's kind of like when people tell me like, oh, I have been exposed to mold and I'm I have this mold toxicity. And then I'm like, well, again, yes, we can address the mold, or we can kill the parasites, or we can address the candida, but let's get your body alkaline so that whatever you're exposed to isn't going to create a little home there. Because if the parasites don't like your body, then they won't survive there. And so it's kind of like when people are doing all these extreme cleanses or like candida diets and parasite cleanses, it's like you're dealing with a symptom again. You're not healing the root cause. So they go hand in hand. So it's really just one protocol that I offer people that starts with cleaning out the intestines to make sure that you're properly eliminating the toxins. Because again, if you're going to flush your liver, but you're backed up in your small intestine, then all those toxins are now in your small intestine and they can't go anywhere. So it's actually making things worse.
I'd love to hear the process for your 7-day. It's a 7-day cleanse, is that right? That you normally work through. So through that, how that process. Is there any preparation for that, or you just go right in?
Well, I like to tell people preparation is not necessary just because the enzymes work so well. And so for people that don't know what enzymes are the building blocks of every single thing that's happening in our bodies. And the way we take enzymes in is from our foods. And so all living things consist of enzymes. So raw foods, raw fruits, juices, they all have living enzymes until we heat it up, and then the enzymes die. So it's kind of like when you get a really high fever, like your enzymatic activity decreases, because if you heat enzymes above 40 degrees Celsius, that's when enzymatic activity kind of goes down. So enzymes will die, cells will die. And so basically it's getting a ton of those enzymes back into your body, and that will aid in digestion. And there's actually a new theory, which I very much believe in, and that's the theory of having a source enzyme, which means that our bodies can kind of like protein, where you have like the amino acids. So if you get one enzyme in, the theory is that your body can basically break that down into a source enzyme and then use it for all the other bodily functions. However, they're still researching that.
When you just said there that heating over 40 degrees kills enzymes. So what you're saying is, like, if I have beautiful veggies, or that, and if I'm cooking them, I'm taking away. Is there like a little level of like a light sear, or is it as soon as they get hot?
Yeah, so that's where I say to people, lightly steaming, lightly searing is great. And then again, I don't believe in having a full raw diet, and I do think that all raw vegetables are too hard for our guts to fully break down, just because the way we evolved, also because a lot of our food is contaminated with things like parasites and stuff like that. So I like to just say add in as many raw foods as you can. So having, fresh juices occasionally, fruits are incredible. And then like salads, but then mixing in cooked foods. But if we're only eating cooked foods and we're not supplementing in enzymes, and we're eating a lot of acidic foods like meats and alcohol and coffee, then basically our body is overworking to compensate for what we're taking in, instead of actually taking in to compensate for our health. And so we're actually working really hard to create energy from the food that we're taking in. So basically what you're doing with these enzymes is you're giving the body space again to heal. And what the enzymes will do is they will go into your intestinal tract and pretty much finish the digestion that is unfinished. And so for some people, that looks like just getting all that mucoid plaque out of the walls. For other people, that have been chronically constipated for 10 plus years, it can actually look like pretty horrifying what comes out of your body. And so because the enzymes they're used in your entire body, they're able to penetrate the bloodstream. So they don't just go into your intestinal tract, they will go into your blood, purify your blood, go into your lymphatic system. Personally, like for a couple of weeks after, I would start sweating out like brown stuff. And like I would break out completely, just because it's opening up your pores after like years of wearing makeup, right? And so it's detoxifying your entire body. And the way that looks like is on day 1 of the 7-day cleanse, it's getting all that mucoid plaque out. So it's basically in one day, just swiping all that out, and you're releasing that on the second day. And then from day 2 to 5, it's just cleansing your blood, deepening the cleanse, alkalizing your system. And then on day 6, you do a liver cleanse, which is basically taking apple enzymes, which will widen all of your bile ducts, as well as soften some of the gallstones that are in your gallbladder and your liver. And then at night you will drink, and this is going to sound really weird, you're going to drink olive oil mixed with lemon and grapefruit juice.
Sounds familiar. I didn't do a proper cleanse. I was like, do this thing. I'm like, sure. So I did it.
Yeah. And so when you do that properly, so the problem is, if I were to just drink olive oil right now, my bile ducts are very small. So, and the thing is, it's really hard to flush that out of your bile duct. So what you have to do is you have to prep the body with a lot of malic acid, which is found in apple, which is why you drink apple enzymes, as well as lemon juice and grapefruit juice. And that's essentially gonna push your liver to create so much bile that it's going to flush out all the gallstones and parasites and things that are blocking your bile ducts. And I have a friend who on her first liver flush flushed out a gallstone this size. It was literally the size of a golf ball. And I mean, imagine that relief that your body is feeling and the space that you're creating, right?
Light and energy.
Yeah. And so the way a lot of people talk about this is that your bile flow directly correlates to your life flow. So it's similar, as they say in Chinese medicine, when it comes to your qi, your life energy. If your liver isn't flowing properly, then it basically just spills over into every other area of your life, whether that's, your work, your relationships, your mental health, your physical health. So I never really understood this until I started cleansing and I saw the ripple effects into my life from the day that I started cleansing. And so it's pretty miraculous. Yeah.
How regularly would you do this cleanse? Like you just do, it's like one a year is a good reset, because we just, no matter what, we're not going to be able to stop our bodies accumulating, all the shit, right? Just the lifestyles we live, unless you hide in the bubble. Is like, once a year with a good diet, a kind of a solid view, go pretty hard and do more regular.
Well, it really depends, right? Because I tell people it depends on what you want to do. If you just want to feel good for a little bit, sure, once a year is great. If you're coming to me with serious health issues and you're like, hey, I have a lot of bloating, or I have a lot of fatigue even, or I can't digest this, I have problems with this, or I want to heal my skin, then, we've taken 20, 30 years to accumulate all these toxins. So over time, you kind of want to give the body more and more space. And so, there's people that are, that have really serious health issues, like they have cancer and they've been given, a couple months to live. And so then obviously it's going to be looking more like a really serious protocol. Or I have patients that are type 2 diabetics, and, type 2 diabetes is easily reversed. Easily, as in you can do that with diet and cleansing. I mean, I have patients that show immediate results after 1 week. It's to see that change is just miraculous. And so obviously their protocol is going to be looking very different than from someone that just wants to feel good. So I personally, because I was trying to heal more serious issues, I had a lot of, indigestion, bloating, skin issues, fatigue. So for me, I started off doing the week-long cleanse, but they basically have one-day cleanses after that. So when you identify in that week, hey, my intestines are super backed up, or my liver is really backed up, you can choose to then do a series of one-day kits. So right now, I'm basically doing one liver cleanse a month on average, which is just a one-day thing, super simple. And every single time that you do that, you get into deeper layers of the liver. And so 1 month, it might look like I'm flushing out huge gallstones, and another month, it might look like I'm flushing out 500 parasites. And the space that you create and the euphoria that you feel for a week or two after is unheard of. It's crazy.
No, it makes absolute sense. I mean, when I speak to people about meditation, a week in retreat is not going to heal the last 20 years of your life, unfortunately. It's got to be, right? And even if you hit away from all stress and blah, blah, your body's going to accumulate and accumulate and accumulate. And every time you go through it, you're peeling back the layers, and there'll be something different for your body to work on. And it's giving your body that opportunity to do what it does best. And you mentioned something interesting. We were talking the other day around, now you don't even need to take psychedelics to have some of those experiences, which I think is fucking cool, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, I've got some mushrooms. Like, I don't need to take mushrooms. So talk me through that.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, psychedelics are a great tool, right? And I believe that they kind of open the door. And once the door is open, if you're in touch with like learning how to reopen that door, then you don't necessarily need those tools. And so how cleansing has helped me is that it takes away the interference between me and my ability to sense more than what is considered normal in this world, right? And so basically what all those toxins do, and what, whether it's like all the EMFs around us or the social media overload or the toxins in our food, it's desensitizing us. So basically when you give the body space energetically, physically, mentally, then all of a sudden you will be able to access more of what we should all be able to access. And so for me, that looks like doing just that. Like I'm able to sense so much more. My intuition has completely shifted for me, like 100%. Whereas in the past, it would have been kind of like, oh, I feel like my intuition's telling me kind of this, but it was not clear, to the point where now like I feel it resonating in my entire body. I have different abilities to sense and see things. And yeah, like without this cleansing, I would have never been able to do that.
I love that. I was like, it shows that like all these, I love plant medicine as well, but they are designed as to give you a taste of what's possible, right? But you shouldn't really have to ingest something external, because there's always a debt to pay for that, whatever it is. And so what's the word? That the cleaner, I suppose, and the more barriers we can remove, the more in tune we become, which is another little reason to look at it. And also just making a really big point about the idea that most of us probably get recommended like medicine to fix issues, right? It's like, here, take this, take that, take that for the next X amount of time. When I think the big point there for me is people to land is like, look at how you can go to the root cause, like what's going on within, which is the big one I think people get enough of. Well, yes, Western medicine can be amazing for, some painkillers if you get hit by a car, yes, but for a lot of this stuff, it's not where it's at, right?
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, that changed for me so much as well, where like I used to just take something to feel better temporarily. And that's also what I tell people when they go on this journey. It's like, there is no quick fix. And if someone told you that there's a quick fix, they're lying. So it's a lot of hard work, it's dedication, it's commitment. And it's not just doing the physical detoxification, because as you're doing a cleanse like this, all your emotional shit will come up as well. It's like you store that in your organs, so it needs to come out. So I encourage, my clients to have a journal practice. There's specific journal prompts I actually tell them to do while being on the liver cleanse or the intestinal cleanse, because a lot of those emotions will want to come up. And it's actually also funny to see when I coach someone through it, where exactly they're blocking themselves in their lives. Because, if a client of mine is getting mad because they're like, it's not doing what it's supposed to do and this and that. And then I'm like, oh, I see why it's not doing what it's supposed to do. It's because you're holding on to these emotions. And so then we're able to shift that. And all of a sudden, when they learn to surrender to the process and just trust, that's when they'll see, that ripple into other areas of their lives as well. So it's really beautiful to see that.
I also love how you've got a few different, feathers in the old hat. And obviously I've been to a few of your workshops, and I wanted to touch on the power of sound and the sound healing. Because beyond the fact that I just love lying there and listening to you do your bowls and come with your ocean thing above my head, I'm like, oh, here we go. I also love, the concept of quantum physics and sound vibration. Can you talk us through quickly why you also use sound and sound balls and sound healing in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of came on my path when I realized like how, and this, right? As a meditation facilitator, it's like people's minds are running nonstop. So it's almost like when they play stories over and over again in their head, it's really hard to break those cycles. And so what is a beautiful tool for me is using both my voice, sound, and, different instruments, breath work, to kind of quiet down that voice and get people into that theta brain state. And then they're much more open to suggestions, right? So in a lot of my meditation sound journeys. I don't know if you've experienced one of those, but I actually usually take people more on like a guided journey. So it would be doing body scans, creating space within the body, getting rid of tension, and really bringing that awareness of that mind-body connection so that people hopefully have the tools to walk away with that when they leave a session, instead of, oh, I'm just going to come to a sound bath every week for you to just heal me and I'm just going to fall asleep, right? It's like such a different experience. So yeah, for me, it's really powerful to get people to that level. And then also when I talk to people after, it's like all of a sudden I'm able to have conversations on a level that I wasn't able to have with them before, because they were in their minds and they were thinking and they're doing their own thing. Whereas when you bring them down to that level of being super present and super still, then all of a sudden you can have like that true heart to heart where it's like everything's out of the way.
If someone would be like, oh, cool, I want to explore or look into sound healing, have you got recommended, like, are there certain hertz people should look for, or certain, binaural sounds or ways they could find on YouTube or Spotify to give it a little taste if they can't get to one of your sessions?
Yeah, well, so I personally, what I love to do is there's a lot of content on Spotify, for example, when you look into like sound bowls or Tibetan bowls. And then I personally like to meditate to them. So like it immediately brings me into that state. Whereas like, other meditation music or spa music, it might be a little more like all over the place. So either like you're saying binaural beats, or I love 528 hertz, or like just sound bowls, like any sort of sound bowls that you can find on Spotify that you're like, oh, this sounds really nice. And it's going to, everyone has their own preferences. So again, just figure out what works for you, and then just creating a little playlist that you can meditate to, or even when you have trouble sleeping, or you want to get really focused at work, or while you're journaling, just like putting it on, it just like immediately quiets down the mind. So it's really nice to to have that be a part of your daily life.
Just simple things like music, breath are probably two of the most powerful state change tools that we've all got access to, that are free right there. And they're profound healing tools and state shifting tools. So it's also one of those things for people. It's like, it's not hard. And the stuff's there. So just to round off, this is probably going to be a hard question for you to answer, because obviously we've talked, there's a few, and there was other areas we could have gone. Actually, no, I want you to talk me through CRT quickly. This is so interesting. So could you explain what it stands for, what you studied, and what it means? Because you also use that in your coaching.
Yes, I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. So CRT stands for cellular resonance technique. And so basically what it's doing, it is using some different methods and basically finding interference. And what that means is that if you've never heard of applied kinesiology, definitely suggest looking that up. But applied kinesiology essentially uses your body to find yeses and nos. So for example, all plants grow towards the light, right? So the light, or the sun, is clearly a universal positive charge. And for example, if you think about the word hate, that is a universal negative charge. So if you hold up your arm, essentially like this, and I just ask you to hold it up, and I would test here, if I think or say love, or you think or say love, it'll test strong. And the moment you will start to think or say hate, your muscle strength will decrease by like 50%. And so it's fascinating. I would definitely advise anyone to even just play around with that by themselves. You can Google just muscle testing techniques to do by yourself. And so then all of a sudden you have a truth, a universal truth that resonates for you. So you can ask even things like, do I want animal protein? And then your body can give you a yes or a no. And so it's, it can be as simple as that, but how CRT uses it is it looks at where are your negative things and how can we undo that. So for example, if you have a trauma that is very clearly coming up for you in your life, the moment that you think about that trauma, your body will go weak because obviously it has an emotional charge to it. So what CRT does is it will basically use various mantras. So if for me, that would be like, I love and accept myself as I am. If my body tests weak on that, that means that my subconscious mind is like, no, I don't love you. I don't love you. So what it's doing is I'm going to be repeating in my head, I love and accept myself as I am. I love and accept myself as I am. Then your body will give me an eye direction and a breath that you would like to work with as you're clearing this, as well as a frequency. And again, it's very detailed, but basically what I'm going to do as you're repeating this mantra is I'm going to feel your pulses. And so there's a universal pulse that basically is always happening. Like there's just a universal pulse that's always happening. And so basically what you can feel is when there's different points on your head, you can feel almost, it feels like a heartbeat. You can feel the interference. So they're not equal. So if I put my fingers here and I think about something negative, it'll go and then what you're listening for as a practitioner is I'm basically just listening until that pulse becomes equal and resonant. And that means that we've cleared the interference. And so then when I ask you to say, I love and accept myself as I am, it'll feel different in your body and your body will test strong. And so that's how you can basically undo any traumas, any food sensitivities, any physical pain. You can basically apply to anything. And so that's why I'm like, I think that this is the future of healing, because anything in my life that I felt blocked in or stagnant or that had an emotional charge for me, I just brought it to a CRT session and it was cleared. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, okay. It's fascinating.
Yeah, no, I love it. So I've done so much kinesiology and energy work and spiral and quantum collapses on all this sort of stuff. So I was intrigued. I hadn't heard of CRT. So I was intrigued to see how that fit into the world. And so if you were to say, someone's like, all right, cool, I've heard all these different things I could do. And you're looking at, what do you think for you has probably been for you to point it down to like a shifting point or one of the most profound impacts on your life? What would that be? Would it have been the gut work? Was it the breath, the sound, CRT, like which you did? Like, was there something?
Yeah, I think personally for me, it was the enzyme cleanse, mostly because that was the moment that everything in my life started falling into place. So basically, it helped me shed so many subconscious beliefs that I was holding on to, a lot of scarcity, a lot of fear. And I basically, when I first ingested the enzymes, because you can literally feel them vibrating in your body because they're highly vibrational, they're alive. I felt this like resonance in my body and I was like, oh, this is what I'm here to do. Like I'm meant to share this medicine. And so from that moment onwards, like everything started falling into place. And I don't think I had felt happy like that in my life ever. And so it was just like all the doors started opening and like I saw myself in a different light. I saw healing in a different light. And I started understanding how our internal system and our external world are directly correlated. And so that was a huge shift for me. And then obviously, the CRT work has been opening like incredible doors for me. So I would say both, but for anyone that wants to start, and obviously CRT work is mostly done in person. So until that is like widely spread, anyone across the world can start with the enzymes and can start, paying attention to like how their bodies respond and all that. So definitely I think that's like a great way for anyone to reconnect to that intuitive sense, to kind of look at what's going on inside their bodies.
Well, it's cool because it really highlights the power of, and I think it's empowering, right? Because I used to be someone who, if I was struggling with something, I would buckle down and contract and be like, you hustle, you work harder, you make it happen. And it's like, this ain't fucking happening. And I've now done lots of work where it's like, oh, well, it was a fucking energetic healing session or shift my, diet. Now you've got enzymes we can use. That's where some of the power is. It's not always about working harder, pushing more. It's like, what else is going on? So that's empowering people to go, I've tried everything. Well, probably no, you haven't. These are things to do. So you'd say your work, you specialize in the gut health, detoxing, and then coaching support through that process. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically that's my main focus right now. And that's really what's been taking off. So I have clients all over the world really where, so I coach them through, like these 7-day cleanses. And then from there on, based on what their body is telling me, we can set up a detox protocol. And this is available for anyone's budget, right? If you're like, hey, I want to invest a lot in my health, then we can say, okay, we're going to do more cleanses periodically. If you don't have the funds to support that, then there's all these other great free tools that you can use, like even things like your breath or, the certain foods that you choose. And so that's kind of what I help my clients with, is just learning to work with their lifestyle, with their diet, without it feeling restrictive and still supportive.
Love it. So what's it? Eva Hooft, is it? Is there a dot in between?
Yeah. On my Instagram.
All right. Thanks so much, Eva. That was good chat. There was so much juice and actually more we could have gone to, but you got a wealth of knowledge in that little head.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me. And I loved all of this. So
Chat soon. See ya.